Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Developing a Successful Online Advertising Campaign webinar. This is George Llizo, the VP of Marketing here at PracticePanther. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and let you know to please send any questions you have in the chat, and we'll cover all of them at the end. We're also going to be recording this webinar, so everyone will receive an email afterwards to review it. We are very excited to have Jason Marsh with us today. I'm especially excited because Jason Marsh is an expert in digital marketing and founder of the digital marketing agency Marsh 8. He specializes in helping law firms acquire new clients and receive revenues through effective online campaigns. Jason is also part of the American Bar Association Law Practice Division, Client Development and Marketing Committee, and a frequent speaker at legal conferences and associations across the country. So Jason, first off, I wanted to thank you so much for being here with us today.
George. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get started on this first slide. It looks like you love advertising.
I love advertising, and if we go on, and by the way, everybody, I think George mentioned, putting in some questions and answering them at the end, which we're definitely going to do. We'll have a Q&A session for as long as we need to once the webinar is over. But I also encourage people, and if you have a question as we go through all this, because we're going to cover a lot, feel free to type it in the chat box, and we'll try to answer it, especially if it really pertains to what we're talking about at the time. So anyway, the other thing to note is George is the one controlling the slides, and I'm in a different location, so I'm going to be cueing him to move to the next slide, which is what we're ready to do now.
All right, great. So to start things off, what do you have in the agenda for us today?
So yeah, we're going to be talking about internet advertising, how law firms can use, understanding the different types of internet advertising, different channels, and the way to think about internet advertising in the context of your law firm and how you can use it as a vehicle to generate new clients, to generate revenue growth. So in terms of context of advertising in general, so there's a saying in advertising that goes back a long time ago. I don't know exactly when it started, but probably around the time advertising started. But essentially it says, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. So this is attributed to the guy John Wanamaker. I'm not sure if it's him. I've heard other people say this, but the idea here is that in the traditional sense, as long as we've had advertising, and obviously, in the early days, advertising was in, print or maybe some sort of, outdoor billboard-like format. Eventually, radio emerged, then television. But within all of those contexts, advertisers, they understood that there was real value in running advertising. However, they didn't have a ton of insight into exactly which parts of the advertising was working, which wasn't working. They just knew that it was valuable, but and so it came the saying is that half of the money is wasted. They just didn't know exactly which half, but they needed to continue doing.
Yeah, because traditionally it was very difficult to track the different marketing sources and what the return on investment was.
Yeah, and that's right. And so now that leads us to next slide, digital advertising. So, the internet emerges in, I don't know, say the 90s and starts to reach some real maturity, in the early 2000s, especially as it relates to advertising. And so, as digital advertising emerges as a channel, what that does is that begins to really level the playing field to some degree, especially for smaller businesses, which many law firms ultimately are, because to advertise on television, radio, and even print can be very costly. So really the access to that type of advertising could be very expensive. The best probably form of advertising, but prior to the internet, was maybe the yellow pages, and Google basically kind of took over the role of what the yellow pages did. But what happened is as the digital advertising emerged, that essentially became, there's all these much smaller advertising units that now allowed smaller businesses to be able to access and promote their business. And so there's three really important things, and this is what we're gonna really highlight, throughout the course of this presentation, to keep in mind in terms of what the real value of digital advertising or digital marketing is in relation to what we've seen in the past with traditional format. And those things are that digital advertising enables you to highly target your audience, it's highly measurable, and it's also very scalable. So the first one, highly targeted. And it's really the idea of showing the ad to the right person at the right time. But more than anything is when you're running an ad campaign, there's nothing worse than spending money to show the ad to the wrong person, somebody that's not likely to be inclined or interested in what your service or product offering ultimately is. So digital marketing, that's one of the biggest assets is that, and we're going to talk about some of the different channels and how the targeting works, but it's the idea of being able to get your ads in front of a more closely tailored group of people that are likely to be interested in what you offer. Next one, it's highly measurable. And that's really important, right? Because that goes back to what we were saying before in terms of traditional advertising. We knew half was working, not exactly which half. But in this case, we have a very clear picture of what's working and what isn't. And that's important in terms of, what George mentioned. Ultimately, when you're trying to figure out what the return on investment of your campaign is ultimately going to be. And it's not just in general, but it's by channel. What channels are producing the best results for the dollars that you're spending, so that ultimately you can shift those dollars into the places that are returning the best possible results and away from the ones that are not. And then the last piece of that equation is scalability. So when we're running these campaigns, the idea is we really, what we want to do, it's not like a one-off client or one-off piece of business that we're trying to get. We're trying to build a model. Essentially, we're going to be able to have somewhat repeatable and predictable outcomes in the sense, and I use the sort of the metaphor of the idea like you're putting money into a machine and out the other side, more money is going to come out if you actually build the model correctly. But that's the key. So, and that goes back to targeting properly, measuring what's happening, and then ultimately once you've worked out exactly what the model is, then you start to scale it so that if you increase the investment, that you can get commensurate returns on that investment. So as we go to the next slide, here now we are in 2016 or 2017 now. If we take that very same quote and think about it in today's context, and in terms of marketing online, we could probably take that and change it a little bit. So we would say something more along the lines, very little of the money I spend on advertising is wasted, and I know exactly what I'm getting out of it. So that's really key, right? As advertisers, we're putting money on the line at risk. We really want to have a good sense of what's working and what isn't. So the next thing I want to talk about is it's really the two fundamental buckets of advertising that you're going to want to think about. So there's going to be branding, and there's going to be direct response advertising, and they're really distinct in terms of what they do and how they work. And I want to highlight this because essentially they're just two different tools in your toolbox. Both have important roles and unique roles, but it's important to understand, what those roles are, what channels you can best utilize them, and some specific tactical measures you can take to do those. So let's start with branding. Excuse me, just taking a quick drink of water here. So when you think about branding, right? A lot of people start, they think, hey, we want to create a brand, or redo our brand, and they think about, logos or potentially even colors, which essentially is your visual identity. Now, that's part of a brand, but what a brand is, it's much more than that. It's really, it's a level of awareness about your business, and then it's the perception that people have about that business. So really, the big thing is, like when I explain to people when they're trying to build a brand within a particular marketplace, the idea is you're trying to get that your target audience, number one, to understand who you are, number two, to understand what you do, and then lastly, and most importantly, why you're special within the context of other providers in your marketplace. So it's not just so it's building awareness. But then beyond that, it's where you start to actually influence customer perception, especially when you think about people then in terms of their buying journey and how they make decisions on who they're ultimately going to work with. The people that they have higher perceptions, higher awareness of, oftentimes are the people that they're going to want to work with. But in the bigger picture, and especially when you think about larger brands and why they advertise. Oftentimes, they're commoditized marketplaces. So this could be, alcoholic beverages or vehicles or certain lines of clothes. Oftentimes there isn't major distinction between, what one provider offers and what another provider offers. So the distinction becomes the marketing, and it's how they differentiate themselves in their presentation, how they brand themselves. And the longest term goal of all, and it's really the reason that pretty much any big brand that you ever see advertising online, and this applies to small businesses as well, is when people have a perception that something is of better or higher quality, they're willing to spend more money. They're willing to pay more money. So it's really about profit margins. So really the model for a branding campaign is you spend the money on branding because that creates greater awareness, increases preference within your target audience, and enables you to charge more money and allow higher profit margins. Those profit margins you can then plunge back into additional advertising to keep building your brand. So that's like the big picture of this. But if we go to the next slide, I mean, here's how it. Wait, hold on. Back up one slide, I think. Yeah. So in terms of being a lawyer, the idea of branding. And this is what I explain to people all the time, especially, like as I said, even in the legal market, there still can be a lot of commoditization. And I'm not suggesting that someone on this call that your services are the same or inferior. Like you can have far better services than the next lawyer down the street, but it's really the perception of the marketplace and the individuals that ultimately matter. So from a branding standpoint, it's to position yourself as being the lawyer in whatever practice area that you specialize in, and not just a lawyer, not just another lawyer. So it goes back to being visible, people being aware of you, but also having a sense that you're the lawyer, not just any old lawyer on the street corner. The other part of that is the awareness aspect. So it's when people are, looking for a lawyer, whatever lawyer that is. So whatever lawyer you are, you want to be the first firm that they think of. And now again, this could be the end clients that you're trying to attract. This could be other lawyers in the community that might otherwise be referral sources for you. But it's being top of mind. So that when people are thinking about, hey, I need this lawyer, for example, I know a lot of lawyers in the community, so, and I've need lawyers for various things over the years. But every now and then I don't know anyone that does something that I'm looking for, and we do what everyone else does. You go to Google, maybe you ask around a little bit, but when that happens, then certain lawyers have lost the opportunity to have positioned themselves at a point of awareness and to be thought of. So this is really the goal, is just to be top of mind when somebody is looking for a specific lawyer. Now,
gotcha. And actually, sorry to interrupt. To go on to that point of branding, there's a very good saying that resonates, which is out of sight, out of mind, right? So if people are not seeing you, then you're not going to be top of mind whenever they're ready to make that decision to call on a lawyer for their particular need.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Yeah, and George, thank you for pointing that out. And so when you're, I think there's a saying in advertising, if you don't stand out, you're invisible. And so so people don't actually know who you are, chances are, and they're not going to call you. And this also applies to people that in your community, clients that you've worked with in the past, staying top of mind because you don't want to be forgotten. And so when we talk about, again, when I mentioned the client or the customer buying journey in terms of what they go through when they determine that they need a particular service to ultimately hiring someone. You talk about branding, like I was talking about, like sometimes use the example of like Budweiser, and the goal of, say Budweiser, they're running an advertisement. Their goal isn't that, somebody, watch the commercial and immediately leap off the couch and race over to the grocery store and buy a 6-pack, Bud Light or something. It's so that when somebody's in that buying moment, when they're thinking about whether they're in a bar or they're, in a restaurant or in the aisle in the supermarket looking to purchase something, they think, oh, I'm familiar with that brand. And that's the whole reason behind branding. Okay, so that's branding, and we're going to talk about some of the specific vehicles and ways that you can do some brand advertising for your firm. But the next piece I want to talk about is direct response. This is really where I would say most of the advertising and money is made within the legal industry. So in this case, we're trying to drive people to take a specific action, right? So if we go to the next slide, we were talking about before, somebody, brand advertising, basically just trying to obtain, presence of mind, awareness for people. In this case, and this can be online, and I'm sure you've seen plenty of direct response advertising on television, even in magazines, on the radio, but the idea is that the ad is trying to drive people to take a specific action. Call now for a free consultation, schedule your consultation with an attorney, learn more about estate planning, whatever it is, you're trying to get people to see that ad and take the next step. And this is one of the places that online marketing truly excels at. So let's look at some of the different options, and we're going to talk about each one of these in some more detail. But these are essentially the primary channels that you'll be considering when talking about online advertising and the different things you might try to do to acquire new customers. But there's paid search, which is essentially Google, paid social, advertising across all the different social networking, banner ads, remarketing, which I'll talk about, and then directory advertising. So let's first talk about paid search. Okay, and this is one of the most important ones, and we're going to talk about this. I know there's probably some people on this call that have a whole lot of familiarity with some of these channels and have actually worked in them, and then I also know that there's some people that just haven't done it before. So I'm going to try to keep it at a high level. Certainly if somebody has a more specific question, you can ask that later on, or you can always email me, and if there's something you want to talk about privately, I can try to help you with that. So paid search. That's essentially when someone, and just hang on this slide for a second, but that's essentially when somebody goes to Google and is searching for a particular thing. But the thing to note about paid search and why it is so effective, it's because it's high intent. In other words, someone's looking, they're going to Google, they're typing in a very specific thing that they're looking for. And we talked about targeting, right? The three things that are important in digital advertising, targeting, measurability, and scalability. So the targeting becomes very high intent. People are looking for a particular type of lawyer, you can show an ad to that lawyer. However, on the flip side of that, because this type of advertising is so effective, it's also become very popular, and then that translates to expensive because there's a lot of other attorneys in almost any practice area and almost any geographical location that you're in that are probably advertising using this means. So moving on. I'll talk a little bit about how the targeting works. So as I mentioned, it's by keywords. So whatever type of law that you practice, you could imagine somebody in your area at some point, if they again, if they don't already know who you are and are actually going to Google and typing in your name, trying to find you, if they don't already know a lawyer, they're just going to go to Google and type a more generic search query. So that's going to look something like Orlando divorce attorney. But anyway, let's scroll down. So you can go to Google, and we'll go to the next slide, just so people can see like that. So they go to Google. Let's say they type in Orlando divorce attorney. So now, as an advertiser, you have the opportunity to target that specific keyword or some derivative of divorce attorney. Divorce attorney Orlando, divorce attorney in Orlando, etc. But the idea is, we know that there's an intention there on the user side. So on the advertiser side, say, hey, we want to show an ad to somebody that's looking for that type of attorney in our area. And the way it works is that it doesn't cost you any money to show the ad, to display the ad. It only costs when somebody clicks the ad. And that's why the form of advertising is known as pay-per-click or PPC. So you only pay when somebody actually clicks the ad. But it's worth noting is that the cost for that click is going to vary in your local market depending on how many other people want to target that same keyword. So the more people targeting, the more demand there is for that particular keyword, the more they're willing to pay for that, and that's entered into the system, what your max bid is. That's how, so the cost for those bids can start to go up. So,
well, Jason, I have a question. So many people would ask, there's the local results that show up within search queries. As you can see here, it says the law office of Natalie D. Hall, right? So many people may ask, how do they get on there, and is that also paid?
Yeah, so okay, so that's a great question, and that definitely gets into the bigger area of internet marketing and looking at a results page that Google will deliver for a search result. So obviously at the very top, Google's engineered it in their favor. There's going to be 3 to 4 ads at the top of the page because that's how they make their money. Generally, right below that is going to be a section of local business listings. Now, the local business listings are not paid. I believe that there's some point in the near future where they actually will have a paid spot in the local listings, but that there's no charge for. However, getting your site to show up in those 3, what they call the 3-pack of local listings isn't always the easiest thing to do because, of course, every lawyer in a particular practice area in a particular area wants their site to appear there. So there's some sort of search engine optimization work that generally needs to be done in more competitive spaces, but that area is definitely not paid as of today. But today the primary.
It also takes some time to get within that section of the listing. It's not as quickly as Google AdWords, for example, which is what we're talking about, that the moment you hit start on that campaign, it's running. And you'll appear there if, again, your bid is high enough to be there. But the local listing section, that does take some time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And that's a good point. And it's something I often explain to people to highlight the difference between like an SEO campaign and an advertising campaign, which are both important. And again, they're both just tools in the toolbox. SEO campaign, whether we're talking about the regular organic listings or the local, it may take some time, in order to build that rank and that position on the first page of Google. Whereas the advertising, once you set up the campaign, set a budget, and turn it on, the ads can be appearing immediately. So, if you're looking to basically get more visibility in Google online, both of those are good ways to do it, but the advertising is the way is going to be much more immediate. And again, it's also going to be measurable and scalable as well. So, there's some different, again, there's different advantages to advertising versus SEO, but again, they both have tremendous value in an overall marketing program. So, in any case, that's just rough. I just wanted to give you a primer, especially for those who don't know how Google AdWords or pay-per-clicks campaigns work. So anyway, so that's that. So next we're going to move on to some other alternative advertising options. So paid social. Again, paid social, that's advertising on Google, or I'm sorry, not Google, advertising on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, any of these social media channels that enable advertising. So these are great channels, as we're talking about, for branding and awareness. You can also do them for direct response, but I'd say they're stronger in the branding and awareness. Now they're becoming increasingly popular. Social media has been emerging, over the last, decade or so, and advertising, has been, growing within each of those platforms at different rates. Currently, Facebook is probably the biggest ad-based platform for social media. But the good thing is even though they're becoming increasingly popular as a channel for advertising over the last couple years, it's still relatively inexpensive. So, when you think about, say, Google AdWords, the lawyers that were advertising in Google AdWords, 10 plus years ago, they were laughing, in terms of like the cost per click that they were paying versus what the cost per click today is. Can get very expensive because over time more lawyers have entered the fray. The more demand increases, the more the advertising begins to cost. And it's the same thing here, but because it's really, I would say, an underutilized channel at this point for attorneys, it's still relatively inexpensive. There's some pretty good demographic, interest-based, and some other targeting channels I'm going to talk about a little bit more. Anyway, so when we're talking about paid social, it kind of goes back to the slide that we were talking about earlier. I think that's the biggest, the biggest opportunity in advertising and paid social. And for the purpose of social, we're going to focus on advertising in Facebook. I think that's probably the first best channel to advertise in. Although I do recommend experimenting, with Twitter and LinkedIn as well, just depending on your audience demographics, and who you're trying to reach. But when we think about social media advertising, it's really very similar in many ways to typical broadcast media, whether it's television, radio, or print, in the sense that you're just trying to get your name out there, build that awareness, so that, again, when somebody needs whatever type of lawyer that you are, you're somebody that, if you're not the first firm they think of, you're a firm that they might think of, so that they're looking for you directly as opposed to looking for, a generic lawyer search query in Google. So here's the first thing. So, Facebook and really, and we talked about, the three things, targeting, measurability, and scalability. In any ad campaign that you're going to run, targeting's, that's ultimately going to be the first most important thing that you need to think about. So we talked about Google AdWords, search advertising. The targeting is ultimately based on a keyword, geographical area, say, within whatever area, but, divorce lawyer, estate planning lawyer, personal injury lawyer, but it's that keyword, that particular keyword indicates the intent, whereas in Facebook, the advertising, the targeting strategy is going to look a little bit different. And I think, in any business, I think it's really important, to really think about, especially think about your best clients, the clients that you most enjoy working with, that, are willing to pay the highest fees, that, they're easy to work with, et cetera. Think about that and develop, I guess, a profile of who they are, a customer avatar, client avatar, you might call them. But it's really important to think about who your audience is, because you don't really want to cast the net too wide. And that's the thing that's nice about digital, whereas in the past, to advertise on television, I want to advertise on this channel during this period of time, 6 and 8 at night, because it's sort of the people I want to reach. I mean, that's still a huge net compared to what we can do now in terms of advertising. So let's think about some audiences that you might want to target. So obviously the first thing is prospective clients, right? I mean, the end client that you're trying to hire, you certainly want to get your name in front of those people. But it's not just them. There's also other people to think about as you think about your targeting strategy a little bit more horizontally. So certainly there's other legal professionals, right? And we're talking about building your brand. We love to have all of your potential target audience, wherever you live, know who you are, know what type of law you practice, and that you're really good at it. But that might be a lot to bite off. So another way to approach it is, what about other legal professions? Other legal professionals within your community or within your industry, knowing who you are, and there's certainly ways to target those folks. But the idea, again, is oftentimes, for most practices, referrals from other attorneys are often going to be the biggest source of new business. So this is an opportunity to build your brand among those folks as well. Then there's also influencers, people that work in the same industry, media, and by media that could be blogs, but people that cover, people that write about the area of law or the industry of law that you work at as well. So these are all people that you could potentially be targeting to build your brand, to build your awareness and your reputation with. So next up, I want to talk, I want to start, sharpening, sort of the point on this a little bit, so you can get a sense of, excuse me, take another sip of water here, but just so you can get a sense of really what the targeting potential is within Facebook specifically, because it is quite powerful. So let's head over to the next slide. I want to talk about really the four main ways to target an audience within Facebook. Okay, so the first one is website custom audiences. That's their term for it, but that's basically remarketing, people that have already visited your site. Customer audiences, and that's their term, but that's your existing clients. You have the ability to potentially target them. Something that's really fun, that's called lookalike audiences, and then the last one is interest and demographic and that type of targeting. So let's talk about the first one. It's called website custom audiences. Essentially, that's remarketing. Some of you on the call may be very familiar with the term remarketing, but for those of you that don't know what that means, and this is exactly the way it works with Facebook, it's essentially you're advertising to people that have already visited your website. So the idea here is you put a little tiny piece of code on your website from Facebook, and essentially that people will visit your site. People that are also have accounts within Facebook. Facebook can make a match between those people, seeing that Facebook pixel on your site, and then when they're on Facebook and scrolling through their feed, now you can actually show those people advertising. So this is really the most powerful, and I would say the first place you want to start with any type of Facebook advertising. It's people that have already touched your practice, people that have already engaged with your practice in some way. They visited your site. And now you might think, oh, I don't have a ton of traffic, to my website. And this is what really underscores what good content marketing strategies are. When you have good content on your site and you have a lot of people that are regularly visiting your site, you can now, and oftentimes people are going to visit your site, they're learning, they're getting more information, they're not quite ready to, request a consultation or pick up the phone and call. That's going to happen to, 90+% of the people that actually visit your site. And the unfortunate thing is, once they've left, they might never come back. So the idea of remarketing, specifically within Facebook, allows you the opportunity to stay top of mind, to stay in front of those people that have visited your site. Now, the nice thing about Facebook custom audiences is you can really customize them. So it's not anyone that just visited your site. You can customize the recency of their visit, if they visited specific pages, the frequency of their visits. You maybe want to, and for sites that have like higher volume and traffic, you may want to target people that have visited the site multiple times, have shown a higher degree of engagement, people that have stayed on the site longer. These are all things that Facebook is tracking with their marketing pixel that you can then leverage on your own advertising campaign. So in any case, this is the first place to go. So let me show you an example. So if we go to the next slide, we're talking about the idea, and this is what some ads can look like. And I'm going to sort of explain what each of these ads is attempting to do. So here, in this case, is a personal injury attorney, specializes in car accidents. Now somebody visits his website. Likely they've been in a car accident. They're not really sure, and oftentimes when you're talking, especially when you're talking about Google and people searching for different lawyers, they often don't just visit one website. They click on a link, spend some time on a website reading, they leave, and they literally go right down the list, clicking in and out of multiple sites. But it's understanding that individual's decision-making journey before they ultimately decide, to make that next step and request a consultation and call a law office. Now, some people do that on the first site they see. Some people literally call the number that they see in the ad on Google without doing anything more. But there's still a very high percentage of people that are going to visit your site. They're going to leave. So you see in the far left, the first ad. The idea is just saying top-rated New Orleans car accident attorney. So this is a kind of a combination of branding and direct response. So the idea for this ad is somebody's visited the site, they've left, but now if they go in their Facebook feed, they're going to start seeing this ad. And so you can see what this ad is trying to do is highlight some of the awards and the recognition that this attorney's got, so that the person is now starting to see that name, and they're not going to see probably just one ad, they're going to see a few. So the middle ad, it's highlighting a piece of content that's created, it's created on the thing. So, secrets the car insurance company doesn't want you to know. Now, if somebody's been in a car accident, that might be something that, something that they're interested in reading about. And if they didn't previously see it on your website, they might not know that information is there. So that's a way to where you've created a piece of content and you're now promoting that content, so you're getting more visibility to it. Like for example, I'm a subscriber, to Netflix. I love Netflix, a great service. And Netflix advertises to me all the time. I get emails, I see advertising online, and it's just about the new shows that are coming out. And I often have to see these ads more than once to even remember to watch them. But essentially what they're doing, say, hey, I know that this guy, he's already a subscriber, but we need to keep him engaged, because if he's not knowing, what the new cool stuff that we're doing is, he might end up, not subscribing because he's not using the service. So this is the same idea. Somebody's visited the site, but they need constant reminders of who you are, what you do, and why you're special and can help them. And so interesting content that helps educate them. Another ad on the far right is just highlighting reviews, that this particular attorney has received. But again, all of this is just trying to build the profile and the reputation of the attorney as people are now sitting, in their Facebook feed. Because remember, Facebook, unlike Google, is not, an intent-driven advertising channel. Google's, there's high intent there when somebody's looking for a particular lawyer. But in Facebook, somebody's generally just looking, for whatever information, friends that they subscribe to. But when they see an ad, the nice thing about an ad in Facebook versus Google is if they see your ad, there's not going to be 10 other ads for other lawyers in their Facebook feed, whereas Google, somebody types in, again, Orlando divorce attorney, there's going to be 3 or 4 ads at the top, 3 local listings, and then another 10, regular organic listings. So, they're getting a ton of content and options to choose from. So Facebook allows you to sort of isolate yourself within that advertising channel.
So Jason, just to go on that point, so the middle ad, that's a piece of useful content, right, that a prospective user will find useful. But something to note is that it would be the most effective when this piece of content is housed within your own blog, right? So an attorney has their website, they have their blog, they create a blog post, and then they share that on social in which they boost it, and this is how it would show. Because again, you don't want to share a piece of content that links to someone else's website, correct?
This is for on their website. Yeah, so it doesn't have to necessarily be a blog, quote unquote. It could just be a good piece of content, a page of content, that attorney has written that highlights or details some specific area of the practice of law that would definitely be of interest to the audience that they're trying to reach out to. And so so somebody would click that and they'd be back on their website. And so anyway, that's the idea. And another thing I'll just point out is, I'm sure, we talk about blogging or just, content marketing, developing content on your site. Oftentimes people create a piece of content, publish it to their blog, and then it kind of just sits there dormant. You're just waiting for, people to come find it. And what I try to tell people is that, writing the piece of content, that's 20% of the work. The other 80% of the work is now promoting it. It doesn't have to be in advertising, but certainly, advertising is a great vehicle to get that content in front of the people that you want to actually read it, that would benefit from it, that would read that and go, hey, this is an attorney that we might want to work with. But anyway, I just want to highlight. So the first audience is website custom audience. It's a form of remarketing. You build that audience based on people that have previously interacted with your website. Okay, so the next one, it's called Facebook customer audiences. So now this is interesting, right? This is where you can build an audience based on existing client data. This is just what Facebook calls it, customer data. But essentially we've been talking about the idea of branding, right? So we were talking about staying top of mind, keeping your name in front of people so that that you're not forgotten. And so some of the best referral sources are people that you've worked with in the past, especially attorneys that I would say have a positive view of the work that you did for them. And this is so especially, and this can be really useful for especially for firms that have a longer history, a longer client list. But essentially they can use, again, this is a way for them to get their content, get their information, stay top of mind in front of people that already have worked with them. And the idea is to stay top of mind with them in case they need additional help or they know somebody else that does. And so the way this works is great. The little spreadsheet you see there, you can download that exact spreadsheet from Facebook, and essentially you just start to complete the information. So there's emails, multiple emails, name, phone number, address, age. So any I guess data point or piece of information that you have on an existing client, and like say you have multiple emails, you put all the multiple emails, because the goal here is to try to make a match. You're going to upload this file to Facebook, and it's going to try to match your customer data to the to the data that exists in the profiles. And then based on how many matches they make, then that's an audience for you. So, you may upload a list of 100 people. There may only be a match of 50, and Facebook won't tell you specifically who those individuals are, but you'll see that you have an audience of 50 people that have worked with you in the past, and now you can start to advertise to them. So again, staying top of mind, building brand awareness. The next one, very cool audience. Now this one's very cool. So again, and I recommend campaigns, building, first with the custom audiences, remarketing. If you have, a good database of, previous, clients, start with the customer audiences. And then the next thing you're going to do is something called a lookalike audience. And this is really pretty cool. And the reason is so we were talking about, again, like targeting, measurability, scalability. So let's say previously we built an audience based on people that have previously visited the website. Okay, and we're running that campaign, we're measuring that campaign, we've set up certain criteria which we're measuring the campaign by, and it can be a variety of different things. It could be interaction with the site, new leads, etc. But in any case, we've determined that a particular audience, whatever it is, has performed really well. So Facebook is off, and so now that's targeting, that's measuring, and the next piece is scalability. But the problem is when you talk about, well, you don't have any more traffic to your website, so you can't scale that audience that way. You maybe don't only have so many existing customers. You're not going to be able to add that many that quickly to scale. But say you want to target thousands more new people that haven't heard of you before. So the way to do that is to take an existing audience that has worked. Again, I would start with the the website custom audience or the client audience or the customer audience, and then do what's called a lookalike audience. So Facebook will take that audience, you select it, and you say to Facebook, I want to create an audience that characteristically looks just like these folks. And so they'll basically use their own algorithmic models and look at whatever characteristics that exist within this particular audience, and then give you a whole new slate of people that you could potentially target that basically look like the audience that you've already determined is really worth your time and worth your effort because you've measured it. So anyway, so that's lookalike audience.
So some characteristics may include, like, for example, pages that your existing audience have already liked, job titles, demographic as far as gender and age. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah, and thanks for pointing that out. That's totally right, and yeah, so Facebook has a ton of data on all its users, and it's not just the things that it's not just the information that they've explicitly listed in their profile, but they're accumulating data on every interaction, how everything that you click on to read, click on to like, and so they essentially can build really sophisticated models of who you are and what you're into, and they can then use that data, and the whole point of it for Facebook is that they collect all this data so that they can leverage it and sell it to advertisers, and that's what we're talking about here on this webinar is essentially basically Facebook using all that criteria and creating an audience that looks like that. So this is all about scalability in terms of scaling your campaign, right? We start with those first two audiences, existing web traffic, the existing client data lists. Once you have a good audience and you want to scale it, lookalike is where you go next. And then the last place is interest and demographic targeting. Now, this is potentially sounds like very alluring. You log into Facebook and you see oh my God, I can target people based on whether they have children, what books they read, a whole ton. I mean, literally thousands of data points. And I will say, very mixed results we've had with campaigns that are using this specific form of targeting, especially for lawyers. Depending on what exactly type of law, you may or may not find good interests and demographics that you want to apply here. But it's worth experimenting. But again, this is when you've exhausted the other three things. Because in terms of performance and value, number one, the people that have already touched your site, visited your site, those people are close. That you want to stay in front of those folks. Existing clients, use them to build your brand, generate referrals, and then create your lookalike audiences out of that. And then the interest and demographic stuff you can try later. But certainly don't start with this. Now, some people will come in and say, hey, we don't really have, maybe we're a new practice, we don't have a lot of traffic to our website, we don't have a lot of customer information that we can upload, so we really can't create a lookalike audience out of any of that stuff. If that's the case, then this is where you start. But just know that the return on investment for this type of targeting is generally not going to be nearly as good as some of the other ones that we've talked about.
Yeah. So also, Jason, another question. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can do a combination of these as well, right? You can set up a campaign where you can target a lookalike audience, and then also target based on their interests or demographics along with that lookalike audience, correct? You can create a campaign using both sets of audiences?
Yeah, so yeah, you can start to layer different types of audiences as well. So again, in some cases that may make sense to do. It depends on the size of the audience that you're starting with. But again, I mean that is an option, so you may want to try it. and just see what that looks like versus not layering the additional interests and demographics on top of that stuff. So, but yeah, but the point is there's just a ton of targeting opportunities within Facebook, and I just wanted to highlight really the 4 main ones and kind of the order that I recommend, starting with. Because the truth is, for most Facebook campaigns that we run for attorneys, we really never get to this point of interest in demographics. We're really more focused on, existing website visitors, the client list that we have, building lookalike audiences from those, and that's where we see the best performance.
Okay, great.
So in any case, I just want, and so one thing to highlight about Facebook that is that the form of advertising, it's so known as native advertising in the sense that a piece of ad, the ad looks very much sits in the same format as the traditional regular content that Facebook is serving. But anyway, I wanted to show you something. This is actually a screenshot that I took from my own Facebook account, and I wanted to highlight it because if you look at it closely, it's Capital One trying to advertise, a bank account, savings account. But what's unique is that it's talking about a specific type, a business savings account. So somewhere, and I don't think in my profile anywhere, I have it listed that I'm a business owner or anything like that. I don't know. I don't generally put a lot of information in there. But in any case, the idea here is that Capital One wanted to target business owners because they want business accounts. And so somehow they were able to find me and target me as a business owner, because at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense to show an ad opening about a business account to somebody that isn't a business owner, couldn't otherwise open a business savings account. So this is the type of, when we talk about the targeting aspect in the way that we're really able to focus on a very specific type of audience, this is one of the ways where Facebook excels at getting the right ad in front of the right person, like I talked about earlier. So the next thing is, and I touched on this a minute ago, we were talking about the idea of promoting content. Like we talked about, the one article on, the ways that an insurance company, the secrets that they may not want you to know if you've been in a car accident. So again, this is the idea here is that you've created this content and you want to now use that content, to build trust, to enhance your reputation, to demonstrate your knowledge and experience, people, again, within, people that have visited your site, people, that you're targeting. You're trying to position yourself as an authority. So, here's another example, and we're not going to really talk too much about, getting into content marketing, but it is something worth considering because, again, it's not just creating the content. That's a small part of it. It's promoting it, getting it in front of as many people, because you spend a lot of time to create this content. And again, it doesn't always have to be a book. It could be a one-page list of, 10 things you should not do if you're considering a divorce, or whatever area of law. You can create a one-page list of things that people in your target audience might like to know. But whatever that is, you want to go out and promote that. And so the way I tell people is, just really think about, your ideal client and what is it they most crave in terms of information and knowledge. What do they want to learn more about? And that's what you create the content around, and then you promote it. So anyway, in whatever format you want to put that in. So now the next thing is, let's say you've run an ad, right, and you're promoting this, this particular book that you've created. This, and there's lawyers that will send, copies in the mail. There's, you can download a PDF. There's, a number of different ways in order to provide the piece of content. In this case, and this is what Facebook is truly great for, is promoting a piece of content, driving, taking someone to a particular, like a landing page is what we're looking at here, and essentially the job of the landing page is, to really, hype up the book and tell people what they're going to learn in it, with the goal of getting them to leave their name, email, potentially phone number, whether or not they're ready for a consultation. But you're trying to get somebody to engage with the firm, on a level beyond just visiting the site, but you want them to give up something in return for the content. Now, it brings up the question, let's just back up one more. Let's go back to that, George. So it brings up the question of whether to gate content or not to gate content. And the truth is, and I'll just give you a quick tip. Oftentimes, you create a piece of content, maybe it's an article on your website, Then you can also, and it's free for anybody to, to look at and to read, you can also then repurpose that article, that blog post, that article you've written that's available freely to everyone on your website. And now you can create, just have, somebody, put that into a PDF. You can even have a graphic designer spruce it up and make it, look a little bit nicer than just, text on a web page. But then people sometimes, they really, and we do this all the time, where people can get that content for free, but they're giving up their name in order to download it because there's a perceived value when it's in a book or a PDF type of download or any other format. So in any case, the point here is you're generating that engagement. If somebody's not quite ready for free consultation, you've got their name, you've got their email. Oftentimes, what I recommend is setting up some sort of email sequence that follows, once someone downloads that particular guidebook, so that you can continue to engage, you can continue to educate, and again, you're just positioning yourself, and trying to stay top of mind with that particular audience. But it's one way to try to extract value out of a piece of content you've created and generate some engagement. Okay, next thing is banners. I'm going to go through the banners kind of quickly here, just because, number one, they're not that important. I know we're running a little behind schedule. And, this is, again, so we talked about, to this point, like, you want to advertise online. You have your branding, your direct response, and branding. You have Facebook as a channel. Direct response, you have AdWords. From an advertising perspective, I think that's primarily where you want to be. Once, you've really exhausted those two channels, and again, you're looking to scale, you're looking to expand, maybe you want to look at, doing some just general website banners, relatively inexpensive, targeting them only in your geographical area. So you're not advertising all over the country. So anyway, let's just go down one. Next slide. So, obviously these are banner ads. These are basically the first form of advertising online. So we've all been seeing these for a really long time at the top. But, one cool thing about it, though, is if you look in some cases, like, this is, you see these ads, and you could potentially have your ads running, on the New York Times and, Fox and CNN and NBC, just, well-known news brands that, people spend a lot of time on, because often those sites have such a huge volume of inventory based on, the amount of people visiting their site and the page views. They're not pre-selling all that. So algorithmically, they're reselling that, the remnant inventory. So you can potentially buy it very cheap. But again, I would say this is much further down the line in terms of priorities as a channel. Let's go down to the next one. They can be useful, and I would say, again, like remarketing. We talked about, using Facebook as a remarketing channel. Again, I would start there. But this, regular banners can also be really useful for remarketing. So someone visits your site, and again, there's another little piece of code, but that will allow you, once they leave your site, that you can continue to stay in front of those people. Because like I was saying, like, people visit your site, and for any number of reasons, kind of most of them are going to leave without actually calling into your office and request a consultation. So maybe for the first week or 30 days or whatever it is, you can continue to show them ads, keep yourself top of mind, also reinforce some of the core messaging, the differentiators that maybe you have and what makes your firm different. So this is a good way to do it. Again, it's pretty inexpensive, and you have the potential to bring people back to your site that previously had left.
Yeah, of course. And going to that point, you've already spent money to bring that user onto your website. If it was through, for example, Google AdWords, the cost per click could have been high, right? So you could have spent $5 or even up to $10 to bring that user onto your site. And if they leave, and you have a very inexpensive way to bring them back, remarketing is a fantastic way to do it, correct?
Yeah, so that's exactly it. And so again, I would recommend Facebook is the better place to start with remarketing. There's just generally better engagement because of the native aspect of the advertising. But 100%. So yeah, you've spent money to bring people to your site, whether you've spent money developing content on an SEO campaign, on advertising, and I will say, and especially for if you're criminal defense or, personal injury, even family and divorce stuff, we have attorneys that are paying $150 for one click to bring someone to their site in some cases. So if you're going to spend that kind of money to bring someone to your site, realistically, again, they're not all going to convert. They're not all going to, call the office. So when they leave, you can either lose them forever, or you can use remarketing as a way to just stay in front of them. And in some cases, you bring them back, and for very little amount of money. And not all, depending on the practice area. I mean, we have some as low as a couple bucks, and some as high as $175 for a single click. So wherever you fall on that continuum, the price to remarket to them is relatively low, or you're really talking just a couple bucks. So that's a consideration for sure. All right, so anyway, I just want to get into sort of wrapping really this up here. Just on this, sorry, I jumped ahead a little bit on my slides here, but so just back up one. I'll explain what that slide is. So anyway, so in that one, so you have, I showed this same picture before, but what's interesting here from the remarketing perspective is, that Try Digital Marketer Lab ad, that's a site I had previously visited. That's a site, that anybody that's in the digital marketing industry may have visited. They provide, resources, information, and, a lot of good stuff in terms of what's happening in the industry. And so, you can see they're trying to get me back and sell me something for a buck, but that's the idea. So, so that wasn't just some random ad like the Make India Week, which I guess was a random ad. But in any case, that's how that works, just so you can see what it looks like. So anyway, drawing all this stuff together, when you're thinking about advertising for your practice, it's not just business expense. Advertising is an investment, right? And I always ask people, do you invest, right? So go to the next slide. Do you invest? And probably most of the people, on this call invest in something, whether it's, their company 401k, they're on their own, stocks, bonds, IRAs, various different investment vehicles. But, what is it that, we're ultimately after, with our investments? What we're looking to do is essentially, generate a return, right? I mean, we're looking to take existing assets that we have, and try to grow those, leverage those into some type of return. And when we think about those, what's a good return realistically? I mean, and all the things I mentioned, whether it's, real estate, stocks, bonds, just annualized, year over year, 10, maybe 15%. I know, I'll take 10% all day if I can get that every year, with, minimal amount of risk. I'll take a 10% return, for in the stock market and whatever, mixed portfolio. So, but that's realistically what you're looking at. But again, the goal is the return. What if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, listen, I got this deal for you. I can double, triple your money, 100, 200% returns, and you might not even have to wait a year." You'd think somebody is running some sort of scam, right? Like, oh yeah, give me a break. Like, where are you getting, 100, some special hedge fund invitation, or, who knows? But in any case, where can you see that? So the point being is the whole goal of your ad campaign is return on investment. That's it. End of the day, that's all we care about. So, okay, so let's talk about a couple of things we need to understand. So, we talk about acquiring new clients. The first thing we need to think about, and especially, from an advertising standpoint, it's like, okay, just spending money blindly in AdWords, Facebook, any other channel. The goal is to acquire new clients and the revenue that comes with them. So really the first question you have to ask yourself is what can I invest to acquire my ideal client? What am I willing to spend in dollars that will bring me that client? So if we go to the next slide, there's actually one thing we have to do before that. And so if we back up a little bit, the first thing we have to do is, think about our ideal clients. Again, sort of make that, that customer avatar, that client profile, whatever it is, whatever the characteristics are that define your ideal client. But then think about what is that client ultimately worth on average in revenue. And, of course, different client matters are going to vary in terms of how much time, but if you just look over, the entire, aggregate of all the different clients, in a particular practice area, and there's probably, some way you can ballpark, what we like to call, in the marketing industry, lifetime value. What is a lifetime value of a new client we bring in the door? And that's not just the first engagement, and depending on the type of practice you're in, you may work with somebody for many, many years and multiple different matters over the years, or if it's, maybe a criminal defense attorney, maybe you work with somebody, one time, hopefully, and that's it. But at the end of the day, what is the lifetime value of that client? What are they worth to the practice in revenue? So once we've identified that, now we can start doing some math around figuring out like how much we can invest to acquire that client. And so I put together this spreadsheet, and if somebody needs this spreadsheet, you can email me. I can send you a link. You can download a copy of it. But anyway, so let's look at this. At the very top, that first 4 lines, those are the inputs. And so I'm going to just kind of walk through this. And again, like if you need this, you can plug this in yourself, because so the first thing we started with is $10,000 lifetime value of a client. And I realize like that could be very high for a lot of lawyers, that could be on the mark, that could be low in some practices, if you're doing, corporate type of stuff. In any case, the actual figure of what a client is worth lifetime doesn't really matter specifically in terms of this calculation. It's really the percentages that we're working with. So so that $10,000, that could easily be $1,000. That could be, 5,000, 100,000, whatever it is. But here's the math we're going to do next. So we're going to just start with the notion that a new client, lifetime value of that client, and again, like this is, a client that maybe does multiple things with you and is worth $10,000 over their, relationship with the firm. So that's the revenue that we're targeting. Now we're gonna do some basic business accounting here, because we need to understand what the cost of servicing that business is going to be, and what the overhead that we need to attribute to that revenue is going to be. In a typical service model, legal model, generally, and obviously the way your practice set up may vary, but generally 50% of revenue is going to go towards labor. Now if you're a solo, then that's paying yourself. If you're a large firm, then that's typically what you're allocating to pay the lawyers to do the work. The indirect is your overhead for the offices, your technology, your phones, etc. So anyway, you're just allocating that out, but you can change the percentages in this calculator. You can put them in as whatever you want, whatever they make sense as. And then we're going to estimate in that yellow line client acquisition costs. So in this case, for acquiring a $10,000 client, we're going to say, all right, maybe would we be willing to spend even $1,200 to acquire $10,000 of revenue? So we plug that number in, and let's see what that looks like. All right, so we do that. We've spent the $1,200. We've acquired, on that next line down, revenue, $10,000 in revenue. Subtract our $5,000 in direct labor costs, $2,500 applied to overhead. So now we have a gross profit, $2,500. Well, let's go ahead and subtract the money we spent to acquire that client. And again, you can use this calculator too if content marketing is your strategy. I mean, you could potentially, and you should do this. I tell lawyers, if you're writing content, log your hours and know what the cost of your time is. But in any case, so in this case, so now you've come out with a net profit. So you've invested $1,200, you've made the $1,200 plus another $1,300 back on top of it. Again, if you go to the top, like if you're the solo or small, you're actually doing the work, and you're going to take that $5,000 in labor costs. It's really $6,300 in net profit. But in terms of like real business accounting, that $1,200 investment netted $1,300 in profit, which is 108% return on investment. And the truth is, these are really conservative numbers, I would say, on the whole. I mean, that's kind of like a 1x type of return. Typically, we see, I would say, somewhere between 4. I mean, certainly, we want to see probably 3 or 4 at a minimum, all the way up to 10x return. But in any case, if you just go to the next slide, I mean, just a $1,200 investment netted 108%.
I had a question, Jason. So many people may have the question of how do they estimate the client acquisition cost, right? So if you can break down the math of that, I think it would be very helpful, because $1,200, again, many people would say, okay, I don't really want to guess how much I'm willing to pay. What am I currently paying, or what would be the max that I could pay?
Yeah, so, okay, that's a great question. So, first you got to start with, just working out your average lifetime value of a client, and then you need to know your profit margins. You hear this in business often, what's your break even, that sort of stuff. So, you need to know that, and this idea, we're saying a $10,000 client is potentially, worth 20. If you look, I mean, in this case, we're saying $10,000 of revenue is going to be a gross profit of $2,500. So you just have to do the math. It's not necessarily a guess. You have to have some sense, and then once you start running the campaigns, you're going to figure out on a per channel basis what that acquisition costs look like. Your acquisition cost, maybe $800 in Google AdWords. It might be $1,300 in Facebook, and ultimately you have to decide if that meets your business model. And the profit, but you have to know what your profit margins are, and that starts with one, knowing what the average revenue is, and then what the costs against that revenue is. So that's really, and you could use this calculator to play around with that, or create your own version of that. But that's basically it, if that makes sense. So anyway, so in that model, we're saying, hey, we invested some money, generated 108% return. That's solid. And as I said, like often that's fairly conservative based on what we see. And again, this is when I said up front that I love advertising. I love it because I've seen the power of it. I've seen what it can do to help to grow a business. So anyway, so we were talking about go to the next slide. Somebody comes up to you, oh my God, I got this crazy 100-200% return. What is this amazing investment opportunity? Well, if you go on, it's your business. This is your practice. And that's the beauty of it. You're investing in your own, your law practice. It's a business, but you're investing in it, and advertising is a vehicle to do so. And the nice thing is, you control much of the risk equation. You're not investing in another company that's controlled by other people's decisions. This is your business, and this is a way to invest directly in it. So the question then becomes, when you think about your own firm, are you investing in your firm? Does your firm, have an investment strategy or a growth strategy? So this is one way of thinking about it. So the last piece here, right? We just said we were going to be talking about, how we are going to build, an online ad campaign that's going to be, highly targeted, highly measurable, and now highly scalable. So in the model we talked about before, it's like, okay, great, you run this campaign, you ran, whatever, you end up with, $1,300 in profit. Obviously, that's not going to make your year, but it's really about the idea of, scaling. It's like we've identified a channel and a model in which we can operate here, invest a certain amount of money with an expected or repeatable type of return. So it sort of becomes this marketing machine. And so if we go to the next slide, we can project that out using the similar calculator, right? So we've just added another column to the right, and say we want, we're going back to the idea of a $10,000 lifetime value client. Again, it doesn't, the number itself doesn't matter, it's the percentage. So just think, it's 1,000 or 5,000, doesn't matter. But then it's like we don't just want one of those, like in our previous example. Maybe we want 20. Maybe we want 20 a month, 20 a year, whatever the number is. But this is the type of growth we're targeting. So now we can look at those same numbers and look at how those play out at scale. Times 20. So it's so like on the far side, this could be a small solo practice right here in terms of, okay, we're targeting $200,000 in total revenue, so that's 20 clients over the course of the year. Our direct cost 50%, our indirect 25%. We're going to invest $24,000, try to acquire that revenue, and you can start to see what that breaks down as. Generates $200,000 in return, the costs against that, and ultimately the profit. So anyway, so really you just have to play with your own numbers, like George was saying before. This is not about guessing. I mean, you really want to have a sense of, what your maximum investment could be going in, because again, like any business, you need to know where your break even is before you start, spending money that exceeds, what you're actually profiting on. But it's not super complicated math to figure that stuff out. And then from there, it's really just actually building out the campaign, investing the money, and measuring it, and if it works, scaling it.
Yeah, definitely. And also, there's another number that's very important to know is your cost per acquisition, and what the maximum cost per acquisition you're willing to have is, right? So it's that part of the equation right before the lead becomes a client, right? How much you're willing to spend to acquire a lead. So what you would need to know, correct me if I'm wrong, is, for example, the percentage of leads that ultimately turn into clients, and then work the math backwards from there, correct?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And obviously, when you're running a campaign, you're breaking it out in a lot more detail in this. So, typically when we look at a campaign, it's like, okay, like, how much, did it cost, to show the ad? How much did it cost to get someone to click on the ad? How much did it cost, as George saying, to convert, to actually call? Of the people that called, how many wanted to come in for a consultation? Of the ones that wanted to come in for how many actually did? Of the ones that did, how many signed up? Of the ones that signed up, what was their revenue worth? And so you're actually going to, as you're running these campaigns, you want to break down each of those things, have a sense of, what the drop off is, from one spot in the funnel to the next. But again, this is the model that you start to build. So then you're just trying to fill the funnel at the front end. Like, okay, can we get, twice as many clicks? That's going to lead to twice as many calls, twice as many consultations, and so on down the line. But absolutely, as George pointed out, you want to be measuring every detail of this, because you can identify areas in the funnel, say, hey, like, we're getting a lot of traffic to our to our site, but we're not getting the calls. Like, so, okay, maybe the site needs to be worked on. And in some cases, it's like, hey, we're getting a lot of calls, but, we're not getting people to actually, want to come in for a consultation, or people are saying they're coming in and they don't show up. And so there's all these things, but when you look at the big picture, it's basically cost of acquisition for what amount of revenue, and you just need to know what those numbers are, and that's how you build out a mature and ultimately profitable and successful marketing campaign, is by knowing and measuring everything. So anyway, so I guess we're going to wrap this up with some ethics. So just want to make sure when you're running these, when you're going to be running any type of advertising campaign, whether you're running it individually, you have someone in your office managing it, or using a third-party vendor to do it, obviously complying with advertising rules in your particular state bar is going to be critical, and you're ultimately going to be responsible for it. So you probably want to familiarize yourself with what the ad rules are, and at the very least, make certain that whoever's running the campaign is familiar with them. This is here's a quick reference checklist from the Florida bar. The full ad is something like, I don't know, 108 pages long. Here they have 3 single-space bullet points, but just to sort of joke around, but there really are some real ethical considerations that you want to make sure you follow. So just to highlight what some of those are. If we go to the next slide, is and again, you're going to want to be check specifically what your state requires. Some of these things apply, some of them don't, depending on the state. But typically, you need to have your name or your law firm in the ad, where you're located. You obviously don't want to be saying things that are misleading or deceptive. Guaranteeing success or specific outcomes. The biggest one is you just, whatever you're saying, you really do want it to be objectively verifiable. So, you don't want to necessarily, in some states you actually can claim expertise and specialization, others, preclude it. Beware of, adjectives and superlatives. So, you oftentimes see, ads, people claiming to be, the best, the top, number one. Unless your state allows that, you want to avoid that. However, you can potentially use, because again, best, top rated, best, that's not necessarily going to be objectively verifiable. But you, instead of saying top, you can potentially say top rated if you have, good AVO, or fine law, super lawyers. If you have, top ratings, then you could potentially say something like top rated. And not be running afoul of that. Last thing is endorsements, person not qualified to make. That can be an advertisement. That could also be just on your website. If you're listing, client reviews, some clients saying like, this is the best divorce lawyer in the state. Well, chances are that person's not really qualified to make that. But if you're publishing on your website, you could potentially be running afoul of some ethics rules. So anyway, I think that wraps it up. We've gone, about an hour and 15 minutes. Yep. I'm here for questions.
Yeah, fantastic. Yes, we want to thank you very much, Jason, once again for joining us. If there's any questions that our current attendees would like to ask, the chat section within GoToWebinar is open for you to type in any questions there. We'll wait a couple seconds as people type in their messages. So once again, where can people find more about you, your services, and what you're about?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing I tell people, like, if you want, have a email subscription. If you want to go to that, it's actually, what is it? Hold on. So you find me on Twitter. If anybody has questions they want to ask me privately, you can always email me. I'm happy to jump on a call and talk to you a bit about what you're trying to do. Jason at Marsh 8, my Twitter. It's at _ Jason Marsh, not Jason Marsh. Don't forget the underscore. I don't know why I said that. I think I couldn't get Jason Marsh. I wish I could. And then the last one is if you just go to my website, marsh8.com/subscribe. You can subscribe to my mailing list where I just put out information on the latest things that are going on with internet marketing for lawyers, things to know, things to help grow your practice, things like that. So I won't be bombarding you with stuff. It's just more informational. But that would be the place. So marsh8.com/subscribe. And
okay, perfect. Well, it looks like there's no questions being asked in the chat. Well, again, if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to send over a message to Jason. Again, Jason at marsh8.com. He'll be more than happy to answer any questions. If there's any questions for myself in regards to PracticePanther, you could reach me at george@PracticePanther.com. Once again, thank you very much, Jason. It was a pleasure having you on.
Pleasure was all mine. So anyway, happy Friday. Fridays are the best, everybody. Appreciate you coming by. And again, if you have questions, let me know.
Okay. Thank you. And again, this is being recorded, so you're going to receive an email with the recording of this webinar. Everyone who attended is going to receive an email with the recording. So again, thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone who attended, and have a nice and happy Friday.
Later, everybody.
Bye.